Spiritual Pizza Slices with Buzz Coastin. Brought to you by buzzcoastin.com. Go there for more information.
But you got to have vision.
Hi there, I'm Buzz Coastin, and I'm serving up slices of spiritual pizza. Once upon a time, in a remote Hawaiian jungle, a group of hippie outlaws experienced the very first spiritual pizza. Over time, word of that experience spread worldwide via the coconut wireless, thereby inspiring intrepid adventurers to hike the notorious Kalalau Trail for the spiritual pizza experience. Long before I had my first slice in 2002, I had already heard about spiritual pizza more times than I can now recall. And I tell you about that memorable first slice experience in my book, Spiritual Pizza. The mana is everywhere. And in the Spiritual Pizza audiobook experience, too. This first season of Spiritual Pizza Slices will offer abridged audiobook chapters, some background stories about the stories in the book, and some director's cut commentaries on the moving pictures. For most of my life, I have walked the earth, met people, and got in adventures. Now, fast approaching my dotage, I'm releasing an eclectic mix of trippy memorabilia that I collected while walking the earth. Hope you enjoy the flashbacks from my trips. If you like this kind of thing, be sure to subscribe and tell your friends. And if you don't like it, well, be sure to tell your friends. And thanks for listening.
Bop, 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 bop.
The Hippie Kids from Puna, March 2002. Makana Kahoe. What a gift. The case of the missing bag. My sleeping bag had gone missing. That was the first thing I noticed when I got back to my camp. It had been hanging on a nearby tree just a few hours before, but it was not there now. Dang, I really liked that bag. It really tied the camp together. And even though I knew I could bum a bag from Ronnie, my first thought was, this is Kalalau Valley. This will work out just fine. After only a few weeks in Kalalau, I was already getting the hang of it. So I wrote a note and fastened it to the same tree. If you took my bag, please bring it back. All is forgiven. Mahalo e aloha. Then I went for a walk up to Ronnie's camp and reported my bag missing to Damea. Ronnie offered me another sleeping bag, and that offer was standard issue Kalalau mana. But what happened next was very, very, very Kalalau. When I returned to my camp, I saw someone walking towards me from the tourist trail. Was that Jesus headed my way? The guy had long, blonde, curly hair. He was somewhere around 30, and he looked like what most people would call a hippie. Jesus was bowing from the waist, and his hands were in the namaste position. He was saying greetings and blessings, and he was also carrying my sleeping bag, cradled in his arms. Greetings and blessings indeed. Jesus said his given name was Chad, and that he had passed through my camp while crossing the river, probably by walking on the water. To Chad, my camp looked deserted. He also knew that people left kickdowns near the river crossing. I did not know that. Chad recognized the opportunity to score a kickdown, and Jesus had no idea the bag was mine. Sorry, brah. No worries. I got my bag back. All is well on earth and in Kalalau Valley. After that short exchange, Jesus left for the beach to rejoin his hippie crew. All apologies accepted. Kalalau worked it out. That was great. Thank you, Kalalau Valley. Periodically, I would run into Chad and the Hippie Kids in my travels around the valley. But we didn't hang out together, and we were only casual acquaintances. and that bag experience with Chad took place during my first 2 weeks in Kalalau Valley, a few days after Rick had choked Brenna. However, time passed quickly, and within a month I was out of food. Not wanting to be a drainbow like the Hippie Kids, I decided it was time for me to hike out. Reasons to flee paradise. Now, to be honest with you, I was really looking forward to leaving Kalalau Valley. And not because I didn't enjoy living in Kalalau. That was really great. However, during my last week in Kalalau, I was jonesing for the bright lights of the Alps. I missed the conveniences and the ubiquitous honky death chow. All that stuff and my missing wallet were singing enchanting songs, just like sirens calling me out of paradise, just as the sirens in the Odyssey entreated Odysseus to surrender to his destruction. But unlike Odysseus, I was more than ready to go for him. After my first month-long fast from electric civilization, I really wanted to get to the Alps, and pronto. During my last few days in Kalalau Valley, I would often daydream about the big breakfast buffet I was going to pig out on once I got to the Alps, and if I found my wallet. Or I would imagine how great it would be to be able to get anything I wanted whenever I wanted it. Within reason, of course, but on the Alps. A soft bed and a pillow were also part of my longings. However, what I missed most were the conveniences and the luxuries of the modern world and my wallet on the Alps. Now out of food, I had the perfect excuse for leaving Kalalau. As if anyone but me cared about my excuses for leaving. However, I cared, and I told myself that when I retrieved my stash, I could hike back in. Maybe. Even then I knew I was lying to myself. So after a meal at Ronnie's camp early one evening, I hiked up to a campsite at 8 Mile, just beyond the top of Red Hill. This was to save time and energy for the long hike out the next morning. It was twilight when I reached the top of Red Hill. Then I turned and surveyed the valley below, and took one last wistful look at Paradise Lost. I really wanted to stay, and I really wanted to go. But I told myself I had to go, and so I did. The next morning, after an uneventful night at 8 Mile, and with nothing to eat and nothing to drink but water, I began my plod out. The hike out was a lot easier with no heavy packs, and so that was nice. The Hanakoa rest area was only a few miles away. Entering Hanakoa by hopping over the river rocks requires some concentration on that task. The Hanakoa rest area is not clearly visible until after you cross the Hanakoa stream. Deja vu all over again. Once the stream was forded, I focused my attention on the scene at Hanakoa. It was crowded with groups of campers. Most were headed into Kalalau Valley. Among that gaggle of campers were the Hippie Kids from Puna. What a surprise! And, as I was entering Hanakoa, Jesus Chad the Hippie Kid spotted me and gave me a hearty hail. "Aloha, dude! Want some grinds, brah?" They were cooking up a pot of hippie gruel on an open fire by the public shitter. Not my favorite place for a meal, and certainly not my favorite grinds either. But you know, we drainbows can't be choosy, can we? Any hippie gruel in a storm is my motto, so I was glad that I would get a little something to tide me over for the rest of the hike out. Hallelujah! Before I could even get a spoonful of the gruel into my mouth, it started to rain angel piss. In Hawaii, there are various gradients of rain that ranges from very light angel piss to massive Noah-like downpours that seemed like they would never end. Thankfully, today this was angel piss. But even angel piss will make people want to get out of it, and the campers at Hanakoa were no exception to that rule. And as the angel piss continued to drizzle lightly, the covered pavilion soon began to fill up with rain-avoiding campers. There was a sudden flurry of cooking activity as campers began making breakfasts on gas-fired camp stoves. The surprise birthday party. pretty soon there was a party going on. It was kind of like the breakfast buffet at a Hawaii resort, except that it was outdoors, spontaneous, and free of charge. People were cooking sausages, some had pancakes, and there were powdered eggs and scrambled tofu, and some people even had coffee with milk. Plus, in the spirit of it's noontime somewhere, wine and beer started to circulate, and even a little pakalolo appeared too. And while all this was unfolding, some dude running into Kalalau Valley came into Hanakoa and stopped briefly. That was in order to drop off several bags of candy, after which he mumbled a few words and then sprinted off towards Kalalau, high on a sugar buzz. A few hours earlier at 8 Mile, I had been tired, hungry, and was worried about my lost wallet. I imagined that it was going to be a long, hungry hike out. The uncertainty of what awaited me at the end of the trail also weighed on my mind. All that was wiped away by that spontaneous birthday party at Hanakoa. I saw that ersatz party as an omen that indicated to me that the hike out would end well. And I kept that thought in my mind because, as we all know, all's well that ends well, and thoughts create reality. Turning towards Jesus Chad, I said, "Wow, dude, I never imagined this." And without missing a beat, while looking me in the eyes, Jesus Chad said, "Oh, I did, brah," out of the mouth of babes. Here I was trying to avoid being a drainbow, and now being fed by drainbows, drainbow style. Live and learn. And even though I didn't care about having a birthday party in Kalalau, the Hippie Kids accidentally gave me the best surprise birthday party I ever had. And it was a complete surprise to me from start to finish. Happy birthdays to me. The angel piss eventually abated, and so the party did come to an end. The Hippie Kids told me they were going to stay on at Hanakoa for a while. I could see why. However, I was determined to make it out before dark. So I bid my farewells to the Hippie Kids from Puna, gave a special thanks to Chad, who had imagined the birthday party that I was too lame to have imagined for myself. And then I headed on down the trail for the outs. On the hike out, my boots had sole separations again, and very near where it had happened before. With no more duct tape left for this needed repair, I removed my boots and laid them to rest in peace. And it was now time for a little barefooting on the Kalalau Trail. However, it turns out that barefoot hiking is way more better than hiking with big clunky boots. Twilight was fading fast once again when I stumbled off the trail into the KA parking lot. As you've already guessed, the first thing I did was go looking for my stash. It was my fervent hope that it was undisturbed and contained my much-longed-for wallet. I located what I thought might be the entrance to the stash. After a month, there was no evidence that anyone had blazed a trail there before. Was that a good sign? This made me wonder if I had found the right spot. When in Kalalau, I had told others where the stash was, in the hopes of having it schlepped in before I ran out of food. Those people I sent to retrieve it used the same information I was using to find it now. And no one ever found nothin'. While scanning the jungle floor for signs of the stash, I saw a slight bump beside a tree. I went and kicked it, and it moved slightly, which uncovered a piece of tarp. There it was. Yippee! This tarp opening was like one of those product unpacking videos. And I began to remove the packaging one layer at a time. First, the forest litter, then the tarp, and then rummaging through the contents of the package until I got to the actual product. And there it was, tucked in with some supplies. My prodigal wallet had returned. And once I had the wallet in my hot big hands, I ran for a payphone. The first call I made was to book a room at the Holiday Inn Resort Kapa'a, and the next call I made was for a cab to take me there. That resort was my idea of upscale camping. The big breakfast buffet there would be my reward for the deprivations I had suffered in Kalalau Valley. And if I could have gotten that breakfast buffet every morning at Ronnie's camp, I would have never left the valley.
So there does seem to be a limit to that thought creates reality thing. Huh.
I will now sum up with some final thoughts about my experience with the Hippie Kids and my hike out. What I learned from the Hippie Kids. The amount of time I spent worrying about food and my wallet was unnecessary. Without even trying, my longing for food had been satisfied by Providence and the imagination of drainbows. While at the same time I was stuck in a negative mindset. I firmly believed that no party was going to happen, no food was available, poor me, boo-hoo, oh, etc. And because of that mindset, I didn't allow myself to imagine anything beyond the worst-case scenarios. My thinking was so uptight back then. Fortunately for me, the Hippie Kids did my imagining for me. And the fact that the drainbows came to my rescue was not lost on someone even as dense as I. The end of the road. Once I found my stash intact, it seemed to me that some invisible hand had been working things out on my behalf. For lack of a better name for that unknown mover of circumstances, I called it mana. Some call it luck. Others use the name of gods or a god. Just because it doesn't have one agreed upon name doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that it's unnameable. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. So says Lao Tzu in the first verse of the Tao Te Ching. Whatever you call it, the mana did not make my life much easier, nor more convenient. However, I was helped to become more resilient and flexible while I was being tossed in the waves of life's ever-changing currents. That said, my troubles were far from over, but for the time being they were being held in check. Later, once again at the Little Grass Shack, I would face many of the same problems that I had faced in Kalalau Valley. Problems such as a lack of food, a lost wallet, plus a multitude of worries and doubts, all of which would make a return appearance in my passion play at the Little Grass Shack. Unbeknownst to me, my experiences in Kalalau Valley were preparing me for the next set of clusterfucks that were rapidly heading my way. And they arrived just 6 months later on the outs, while I was at the Little Grass Shack. My pilgrimage back to the Little Grass Shack turned out to be as eventful as the pilgrimage into Kalalau Valley had been. The same unusual, unexpected coincidences appeared, as if out of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere, in the here and now, on the pilgrimage back to the Little Grass Shack. And one important thing I learned from all this, and have not forgotten even to this day, is the mana is everywhere.